Hello, this is Bad Vibes. Today's video is on a touchy subject that may trigger you. It has to do with family members, and a lot of them are uncle stories, if you know what I mean. So, if that's something that will trigger you, please just watch a different video of mine. And everyone else, sit back, relax, and enjoy. My dad and I were never close. I wasn't close to anyone from his side of the family, but his two younger brothers set off every internal alarm I had. Uncle 1 turned out to be molesting his stepdaughter, who he raised since she was an infant. Uncle 2, who this post is about, I'll call him D. I have several siblings, and we have many cousins living in our small town. They all think D is the best, lots of fun to be around. I never warmed up to him. I didn't trust him, and he had a creepy vibe. I kept my distance, and my mom never made me hug or have physical contact with anyone that I was leery of. D lived next door to my grandma and seemed to be always down with some kind of illness. I was staying with my grandma for the day, and she was making food for D because he was sick. She fixes him a plate and tells me to take it over. I'm not happy about it, but I know better than to disobey, so I take the food next door. I walk in the door and he yells out and says to bring it back there. I walk into his bedroom and set the plate next to his wardrobe by the foot of his bed. D says he can't reach it there and to put it on the nightstand next to his bed. I take it and set it on the nightstand, and D grabs my wrist. I panic and pull away, trying to get loose from him. He's pulling me towards him, and I brace my foot against the nightstand and resist while saying, "Let me go." He says, "I just want to talk to you." And I just say, "Let me go." He finally lets me go. I bolted out of the house and said nothing to my grandma. Later that evening, I tell my cousin, and she said I'm stupid and doesn't know why I'm the only kid that doesn't like him, and he just wanted to talk to me. That I should feel terrible about thinking that he was trying to pull me into his bed. What a terrible thing to say. I didn't mention this to anyone else and began to question if I was wrong and reacted badly. I felt guilty for a long time but still stayed away from him. As I've gotten older and looking back, I think my reaction was correct. What adult tries to get a kid to warm up to them by grabbing them and pulling them towards their bed? What adult continues to do this when they can see the child was terrified? You get a child to warm up to you by terrifying them? No, adults with good intention don't do these things. We were obedient children. If he would have said, "Wait, I want to talk to you," I would have obeyed. D passed several years ago, and there were rumors about inappropriate behavior with young girls, but nothing more than rumors. I still believe I read the situation right. I honestly don't know where to begin or deal with this entire situation. To keep it short, I've been touched in my sleep by him for 4 times now, and throughout them all, my mother hasn't really done anything about it but yell at him through text. She sent me a screenshot, but that was it. It's a little infuriating since he would manipulate her into thinking that he was just putting a blanket over me. To which I reply, "Who the hell is he to put one on me? And you're just going to ignore the fact that he went into my room." He also guilt-tripped her saying, "We can't do much if that's what she thinks, because you know I'm not the one to do that. Let her be. Just pretend to be mad at me when she comes home." My mom acted poorly. It was too obvious. Mind you, I've gone through past situations with family members, grandfather and cousin. I can't exactly leave home since I'm honestly not prepared to live alone yet, and I'm still saving up. No matter how much I barricade my room, he'd get inside. I had to hide and change my toothbrush because it was always used. I had to wear a bra even when I went to sleep. I'm seriously reaching my limit. I woke up to the sound of a kiss close to me. I thought to myself, my mom wasn't home because she was at work by 6 a.m. I continued to pretend to be sleeping and I heard him whisper, "I love you," close to my face. I've never been so creeped out to the point that I trembled. The next day, my mother was away again. I bought so many locks, and yet he was still able to get in. I woke up, continued to pretend to be sleeping, and jolted my eyes open to see him sitting there watching my face up close. He scrambled to the door. That's when I knew I had to do something, and I'm not safe anymore. I sleep with a weapon on me every night now. I never told my mom about these recent behaviors because I know she won't believe me, sadly, or do anything serious about it. So if it ever happens again, I'm gonna have to muster up all my courage to stand up for myself and confront him. I'm a 23-year-old female. I have a cousin, 27 male, who was adopted into the family when he was 12. My uncle and aunt already had 4 kids, all of them in their 20s and 30s, so I'm not sure why both of them, in their early 60s, wanted to adopt a 12-year-old. I never had a problem with this cousin growing up, as he and I were the youngest grandkids, so we bonded a lot. I didn't see him often, with living 3 hours away from my grandparents, then my aunt and uncle living about an hour away. Over the years, I started noticing pretty odd behavior, like messing with dead birds, and just sudden mood changes when talking to him. Then one day, years later, my dad got a call from my grandmother, and she was freaking out. Apparently, my cousin got arrested, and with it being a small town, it was all over the paper. My cousin was arrested for peeping in underage girls' restrooms, planting cameras in locker rooms, bathrooms, CP, and assaulting a minor. I was only 13 at the time, so I had no understanding about what that meant. He was charged as an adult and served only a little bit at a time. After all of this, I never referred to him as my cousin. In the following year after that, I was in a room alone at my grandparents', and he came in and cornered me and tried to hug me before I left and repeatedly told him that he was not supposed to be alone with me since I was a minor. I screamed when he wouldn't stop, and luckily, my dad found us. Once I was older, my dad told me something that was deeply disturbing. Before he was put into the foster system as a child, he was repeatedly raped by his own mother. My uncle revealed to my father that they put him in therapy. One day, the therapist asked him, "If you were to meet your mom again, what would you do?" He said, "I would rape her like she used to do to me, but I would kill her first." Needless to say, I am not in contact with that cousin anymore. This happened when I was 17 and still in my senior year of high school. This is not as creepy as some stories on here, but I wanted to share my experience. My boyfriend at the time texted me saying he had been hanging out at his friend's house, who lived pretty close to me. He asked me if I wanted to hang out with him for a bit, so I agreed. He picked me up around 8 p.m. and drove the couple miles away from my house to a mobile home park. He parked in front of a pretty large-sized mobile home. I felt uneasy because this mobile home park wasn't in the safest neighborhood. This place itself looked a little run down, just like the rest of the homes here. We entered through the right side door, up the small stairs in a carport. Directly in front of you when you first walk in, there's a kitchen and dining room. If you look towards the left, there's a living room that's located in the front of the home. If you look towards the right, there were doors to the bedrooms and bathroom. This was probably the biggest mobile home I've ever been in. It was a little messy, and the sinks were full of dishes, kitchen table piled up with junk, beer bottles everywhere. The living room had a coffee table full of weed, pipes, bongs, pill bottles. Just a bit of backstory. My boyfriend at the time had a bit of a drug problem that later on became worse. Before you judge me, I wasn't aware of the severity at the time. I think he occasionally partied and had experimented, which is sadly really common in the town I grew up in. Little did I know, he was doing a lot more than I knew behind my back. So this problem he had led me to meeting a lot of his friends who also were into the same stuff. I was introduced to his friend who was sitting on the living room couch. I don't remember his name, but we'll just call him Jake. Jake seemed friendly. He was about our age. I learned quickly that he lived with his aunt and uncle, who I was also introduced to. His aunt wasn't social at all. She was in the kitchen, then left to the bedroom and closed the door. There was something strange about Jake's uncle. Something seemed off to me. But he was overly friendly to me, so I brushed it off. He was probably in his 50s, thin, kinda tall, like 5'10", and had blondish gray hair that was receding. Jake's uncle started packing a bowl for everyone. He sprinkled a white substance on top. I sat down on the couch while they all passed the pipe around. I declined. Weed was still illegal at this time, and I've never been a social smoker. I remember his uncle asking me why I wasn't smoking. I really forget how this part was brought up, but Jake's uncle overheard my boyfriend and I talking about cats. He looked over at me and said, "Oh, you like cats? Want to see mine?" Being the cat lover I am, I got excited. "Ah, you got a cat?" He was like, "Yeah, you want to see her?" Now I assumed that he was going to bring her out, so I said, "Sure." He got up and led me down the hall, motioning me to follow him. "Come on, this way." I looked at my boyfriend puzzled and asked if he wanted to come with me, but he didn't feel like getting up. I really didn't want to come off as being rude if I didn't follow, so I got up and followed him down the hall to the very last door located at the end of the hallway. He opened the door for me, and I walked into the bedroom. I noticed a shotgun next to the bed leaning against the wall. I got the vibe that this was possibly Jake's uncle's room. Jake seemed too young to own a gun, and this room didn't look like his style. It looked like a guest bedroom or a room for someone older. I wonder why his aunt went inside the other room. I'm not sure what's going on in their personal life. Maybe they slept in separate beds. It could have definitely been a possibility. Anyway, right next to the bed was a beautiful white long-haired cat on her scratching post inside the room. I went over to say hi and pet her. Jake's uncle walked in, and I heard the door close quietly behind him, almost as if he wanted to be discreet that he was closing it. I jumped up and looked over at the door, and then at him. He must have noticed how scared I looked because he said, "This is so the cat won't get out." He came and kneeled down next to me and started petting the cat. My gut feeling told me that something wasn't right. I felt sick to my stomach. I went backwards towards the door and he yelled, "No, the cat's gonna get out." But I didn't care. I just ignored him. That's when I realized that it was actually locked and not just closed. I unlocked it and swung it open. The cat did indeed run out, so he wasn't making that up. Regardless, I just met this man, so why would he lock a 17-year-old girl alone with him in a room? Why couldn't he ask my boyfriend to come with us too? The room was located at the far end, opposite side of the living room, where no one could really hear us. I went back to the living room so fast and asked my boyfriend if he could take me home, which I would never do, considering he wasn't sober, but I was desperate. He was hesitant, but I asked, "Right now?" I lied to him and said that my dad wanted me home right now, pretending to look at a text on my phone. When we were back in my car, I was so relieved to be out of there. I started telling my boyfriend how Jake's uncle closed us in the room together, and I felt really uncomfortable. He told me that I was overthinking the situation and that the uncle was a good person, so I thought maybe I was overthinking it, but it never changed how uncomfortable I felt about it. Please always trust your gut feelings regardless of what anyone else has to say about it. I never saw Jake or his uncle again. I never wanted to go back there. Over 10 years later, I still get creeped out when I think about it. When I was about 7 or 8, my 3 cousins, Chris, male, 8, Kate, female, 11, and Jen, female, 6, got a stepdad. Everyone was super excited because my aunt had been a single mom for years, and her job at the 7-Eleven across the street from her low-income apartment complex wasn't quite cutting it. Uncle T, their new stepdad, was cool, well-liked, and made good money. He moved in with them, and I would go over every now and again, spending a week or two at a time. Uncle T was hardly there because he worked so much, but when he was, he gave me really bad vibes. I had grown up in an abusive household and had, and still have, pretty good creepdar. And while Uncle T did nothing out of the ordinary, I always felt sick around him and didn't make much eye contact with him. Maybe not creepy, but he used to come behind me when I sat on the couch watching TV and put his tongue on my nose, which I thought was gross at the time, but not necessarily weird because I wasn't sure of what the boundaries for an adult and child interaction should be for that young of age. And not having an uncle before, I thought it might be normal uncle stuff. But looking back at it, I maybe spoke one sentence to him before the interaction and now realize how weird and inappropriate it was. Even though I got a creepy vibe, I was always jealous of my two cousins because Uncle T was always spoiling them and their friends, taking them to the mall, buying them things, taking them to the movies, giving them cash, etc. But I never seemed to stick around at my cousin's place long enough to partake in this. Knowing what I know now, I'm glad I wasn't lucky enough to receive any of the gifts from that disgusting man. After about a year of my aunt being married to Uncle T, my cousin Kate confided in one of my brothers, her age, that Uncle T was abusing her and Jen. Kate said that he would make her give him BJs and would make her invite her friends to sleep over. Kate was instructed to make her friends go into his room and do sexual things to them, telling them that he would kill them or their families if they told. My 6-year-old cousin Jen recounted being raped, saying, "I thought I was going to die." It eventually came out that he was also sexually abusing 2 of his biological sons and was put away for a long time. I'm glad that they got out of that situation. But what makes me sad is the fact that my aunt remarried another man that would hack Jen's phone, making it to where all her messages she got or sent went to his phone as well. He would pretend to be guys she knew at school and would sext her with these guys, getting pictures of her and everything when she was 14. When my aunt found out, he said it was to protect her and it was dismissed. My poor cousins have endured so much real trauma from these creeps, and their lives reflect that trauma. This isn't too creepy, but it creeps me the fuck out. I'm a 21-year-old female, and my uncle is much older than me, early 40s. He's the youngest out of my dad's siblings. He saw me from birth up till I was 9. He was okay with me as a kid and never did anything creepy to me as far as I could remember. However, when my parents were together, my mother always warned me not to get too close to my uncle. When I was 9, I moved away with my mother to a completely different city up north, and she told me things about him and my grandfather. It made me feel gross hearing them. However, I can't lie, I did doubt her, as she had the tendency to exaggerate every story she told. Little did I know how right she was. When I became 18, my dad's family and I met up in the city at that time. It was great. I saw my cousin, who was a year older than me, and we all caught up on what I missed. I interacted with my uncle again too, and was friendly with him, just like everyone else in my family. Though I regret it now because he saw my fun side, and I guess that motivated him to interact with me. He looked much older and grew a large gut and became almost bald. It had surprised me because he looked like your average TikTok star when he was younger. That meeting was okay. However, he began acting strangely with me afterwards. He'd always managed to find a way to touch me, such as putting his finger under my neck or chin to turn my face suddenly towards him, like a cheesy rom-com or something. It was not in the private area, but he was always touchy. This for me was a yellow flag, as our culture is strict, and men don't touch women at all, even in a friendly manner. None of my other male relatives have behaved like this in the past, except for my grandfather. So he made me feel weird, and I had forgotten all of what my mother had told me about them. One time, a particular incident occurred when I was at my cousin's house, and he was there too. My memory is hazy, but I remember he whispered a question about why I'm so shy, and he was so close to my neck when he said it. I could feel his hot breath on my neck, which made me have cold sweat. He wouldn't leave me alone and kept asking me questions, forcing me to interact. Another thing in my culture is women are told to be hospitable and will not cause a scene, as it's extremely shameful, and the woman would be blamed, even for legitimate reasons. He would always do childish expressions at me whenever I would accidentally make eye contact with him, and I noticed he was always staring right at me. The conversations he had would try to include me in some way, and he would always ask me questions about it, though I tried to make myself look busy. I think once, after he breathed on me, I caught him looking through my purse when I was away from it, and he noticed and quickly tried to act like he was doing nothing suspicious. Near the end of the day, I was on the sofa, looking behind it, while petting my cousin's cat. My uncle was leaving and wanted to say goodbye. I didn't think much of it, as he usually would say goodbye. However, he grabbed me by my wrist and pulled me towards him. It felt pretty violating, as I was practically cornered due to the positioning of the sofa. He said some things that I can't remember, as it was overpowered by my feelings of disgust that I had towards him, and panic. What he was doing to me was not allowed in our culture. Men did not grab women by the wrist, not even husbands with their wives. I tried pulling back, but he grabbed me harder, and it felt like he was feeling my wrist even more. It freaked me out, and afterwards he let me go and left. I turned around and saw that my dad had partially seen the ordeal. When I got home, I told him everything that was happening. My dad said good thing that I came to him, and that he would talk to my grandmother about it so she can straighten him up. However, sadly nothing like that happened. My dad instead always kept a distance between me and my uncle. He wouldn't let my uncle into my house if he knew I was in tops that weren't completely modest, and told me not to open the door to him if I was home alone or just with my brother. My uncle was still creepy sometimes. He was recording a video of my little cousin's birthday like everyone else, but he spent some uncomfortable amount of time just filming me, and I was obviously uncomfortable. My dad did call me towards him and kept me under watch while my uncle was near. Once my uncle had come over and knocked like a wild man for us to open the door so he could deliver us some food our grandmother had made. It was late, and did the same thing to our cousins. My dad has told him that we wouldn't open the door for him if we were home alone, but my uncle wasn't happy with that. The weird thing is, he just had a baby. Mysteriously, his wife has never met us or interacted with us. Our grandmother had made. I also don't know why he chases after me specifically. He doesn't act like this to my other cousin, and I'm not a looker. I wish I had listened to my mother from the get-go and just steered clear from him since day one of meeting him. I really hope someday I can get away from him. I think he's really creepy. I sadly don't think he will ever get what he deserves due to my misogynistic culture.